see my title, Antifragility in Life and Work. We've lived through a crazy period of time over the last few years, obviously COVID being one of the greatest disruptors any of us have ever experienced, and for speakers, for most of us, it was a crazy crisis moment with bookings cancelled and clients not doing work and so on. What I want to suggest to you, though, is that there's an opportunity in this disruption, and that there are 5 principles that we can learn from this concept of anti-fragility. 5 principles that hopefully, as tough as the last 2 to 3 years have been, we can come out the other side and say, we've built better businesses now. We've got better at doing this thing we do for a career. The concept of anti-fragility, let's give credit where it's due, comes from a book by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. This is one of those moments where you hate the person who has your original thoughts before you do. I was coming up with all of these ideas, and then I stumbled across this book. I thought, this is it. I've now got language for it. Open up the cover. Discovery wrote the book in 2010. Long before I started thinking about it. So we give him credit. He's a statistician and a data expert, and it's quite a book to wade through. But it's a beautiful and simple concept that I think has a lot of lessons for us. We know what fragile means, right? Fragile is if you drop it, it breaks. If you hit it, it smashes. Resilient or robust, or whatever words you prefer, that we often think of as being the opposite of fragile. So if you hit it, it doesn't break. And resilient, you fall down, but you can get back up again, dust yourself off and keep going. But anti-fragile is something more than that. Anti-fragile is not a word we have in our languages, but it's the thing that would become stronger if it took a hit, that gets better during disorder and chaos, that gains from disruption. And you might be thinking, well, does such a thing even exist? That sounds wonderful, but does it even exist? And the answer is it exists in a lot more places than you can imagine. So in your own body, for example, your muscles are anti-fragile. If you go to the gym, I say if, because I don't know if it's visible, I'm not a gym bunny, but if you go to the gym and you lifting weights, if you do it properly, you'll stress your muscles, and the pain that you might feel is you're really pushing yourself. And if you don't go to the gym, I'm more of a runner. If you're a cyclist, that's when you really have pushed yourself on either a far run or a fast run. You can actually literally tear your muscles. And that's part of the pain, is you literally tearing your muscles. Now, if you do it too much and you rip your muscles, it'll take you weeks or months to recover. So then you've injured yourself. But if there's just got these tiny little tears, your muscles need a bit of time to recover, but then they grow back stronger. And when you come back in a day or two, you can run further, you can run faster, you can lift more weights. By the way, in case it's lunchtime and you're just sitting back and just listening to me, you might need to just realize, I'm sure you do, that every story I tell has got serious principles in them, and I've already given you 4 very good points about not stressing too far. If you stress the system too far, it breaks, it's injured. So you've got to stress it, but not enough. Then you've got to recover. So there's got to be some recovery in it. Anyway, you get this, you know how stories work. In the natural world, if you try to grow a tree indoors and it's got no wind buffeting it, it'll go to about 2 meters in height, and then it will fall over, and you're going to have to put a support up next to it. Can't look after itself. What it needs is to have this, again, not too much. You don't want a hurricane coming through blowing the tree over, but just enough stress. That's the creaking you hear, the tiny little tears in the trunk and the branches of the tree, but those grow back. It's almost scar tissue that grows back, and it grows back stronger. Okay, natural environment, we see it. What about the business world? The MBA language here is Sector adaptation happens after individuals fail. Bit of a mouthful, but let me give you an example. So in the airline industry, if one airplane crashes, they immediately rush to the site of the crash. They extract the black box, which is bright orange, and they go and look through the flight recorder data. They immediately, this is interesting, there are principles in every story, they immediately share what they learned. They share about why the accident happened. They share about the collapse that caused the mistake. They then give that information to the rest of the industry. And if another airplane somewhere else has got the same problem, it's not allowed to fly until the problem's fixed. The sector, the airline industry, adapts when one of the airlines has a failure. Now, of course, the ideal thing is that you are not the airline that crashed, right? So maybe that's a different conversation for another day. But the concept of anti-fragility is to ask the question, how do we develop that? How could we as speakers be anti-fragile? Now, there's a TED Talk, so let's keep it short and sweet. I think there are 5 principles I'd like to pull out of this concept of anti-fragility, and I want to be very practical for us in our industry. So the first is that fragile organizations, fragile people, tend to be short-term focused. So they're not looking far down the track. They're worried about next week, next month, the next quarter. As speakers, you're kind of looking at your diary, you checking your bookings, your appointments, you're preparing for tomorrow or next week's presentation, and you're panicking maybe about the second half of November and December and saying, there's not enough bookings, what do I do? And of course, you've got to do that. So you've got to do the job that has to be done now. You've got a to-do list, you've got to do that. But not enough speakers shift, and I think the anti-fragile shift is that in addition to doing the job that has to be done today, you've also got to be thinking about next year. Now, the way I've always framed this to myself is the work that I do this week. So the work that I open up and I look at my diary and I see the work. So this is responding to requests from speaker agents. This is contacting clients to get a briefing call. This is preparing for the workshop. This is delivering the workshop. That work is what pays for my family to eat this month. So I've got my budgets. I know how many jobs I need to do a month. And if I'm doing that many jobs, my family can eat and we can pay the rent and we can live our lives. Brilliant. So do that. But how am I going to pay for next year's Christmas holiday? I ask myself that question every single day. I've been doing it for 24 years. And I've allocated 15 minutes every single day to try and get next year's Christmas holiday paid for. So what do I mean by that? What I do is this, and if you like, this is marketing and public relations. So sales and delivery is the first piece of the puzzle that pays for my family's meals this month. But marketing and PR is me saying, what can I do that might bring me work in October next year? Well, let me have a look and see what industry conferences are going on in July, August, September next year. Contact those organizers. They tend to organize a good 6 to 9 months in advance. And maybe I will speak at their event for free because it's the banking industry conference. And everybody who's anybody in banking is going to be there. So I'll ask for a fee and I'll see sometimes the industry associations have got more money than you think. But I'll also speak for free. But then I'll make sure that they put me in the banking industry magazine. So that's the deal. So I say, my normal fee is X. You don't have to pay me in cash, but give me some value. I say it more nicely than that, but that's really what I'm asking for. So they might send an email out to all of their members on my behalf. They might recommend my YouTube channel. They might put me in their magazine. They might bump me up from a little sideline workshop to the main stage. We'd have a conversation. What else might I do? I might look back at, randomly go to my diary. So I'll go back to November of 2015. And I will say, look at the list. I did 10 jobs in November 2015. Where are those people? So the contact people for each of those jobs, go to LinkedIn, search for their names. Are they still at their old companies? Have they used me again? Make a connection, ask, put a connection, put it in, send them an email. If they've moved companies, keep up with them. You do that for 1 month from 5 years ago, you've now spent your 15 minutes. And the list goes on and on and on. I'm sure you can come up with lots of ideas for yourself now that I've sparked you in thinking. But genuinely, if I get into bed, the last thing I do before I switch the light off is I ask myself, and it's now a 24-year-old habit, Graeme, have you done your 15 minutes? And if the answer is no, I literally get out of bed and I go and do my 15 minutes. And sometimes it's only 15 minutes. Sometimes I get in a groove and I can do an hour's worth of stuff. But I do it every single day. And just because I'm an idiot like this and it's part of who I am and I've got weird personality problems, I even do it on Christmas Day and on New Year Day, because if you take a break, you might forget to stop the break. So yeah, it's a little bit random and Christmas is a bit half-hearted, but I do it every single day. Antifragile people and organizations have a future focus everywhere. I was going to say all of the time, but it's 15 minutes a day. Right. The second thing that we do, and it's nice to see Jodie Petty on the call. She'll be able to tell us more about this. But I think that anti-fragile people have shifted their language from thinking just about efficiency, just about getting the job done, doing the work that has to be done. And they're starting to talk about peak performance. And for me, this is language that's borrowed from professional athletes. And if you're a rugby fan, the rugby guys are the best example of this. Rugby is an 80-minute game, and for a century or so, we tried to get everybody to play for a full 80 minutes and get their fitness levels right. Then a few years ago, Rassie Erasmus worked out, for the Springboks at least, that your forwards at least can't do 80 minutes. You only get 60 minutes. If you say to them, give me everything you've got from the first minute, at about minute 60, they run out of it. And so what do? Well, it's the bomb squad strategy. Apologies if you're not a sports fan and maybe this story is going over your head. But basically, Rassie Erasmus changed the rules, basically brought off all of his forwards and brought a whole new pack on for the last 20 minutes. And we won the World Cup, so it can't have been too bad a strategy. Other teams have now caught up with us. We need to do something different. But our story is correct. Peak performance means taking time to refresh yourself. This athlete is doing his job by sitting there and doing nothing. We've got to get this balance, and it's actually not a balance between life and work and all the rest. Our lives as professional speakers are weird lives. And some of us are energized by the stuff that we do. For some of us, travel is the relaxation and refreshing time. For some of us, travel is the freak out, use up my energy time. For those of you who are more numbers type people, here's what we think is going to make us more productive: doing another hour's work. What's actually going to make you more productive is to take a bit of time to think, to spend a bit of time like all of you are. Well done for being here to invest in your learning. I've been to PSA events all around the world. People often ask, why do you keep going to PSA events? I'm a 24-year veteran of this thing. My diary's full, it's luxury of a 24-year career that's going well. But it's only going well because I keep doing all of this stuff. And I probably haven't been as good at healthy living and relaxation as I should have been during COVID. So I'm going to a 4-day working week. I was experimenting with it early in the year, taking Friday afternoons off. It worked brilliantly. And then I somehow forgot about it. And I just decided I'm going back to it. And why not? Again, so not everybody can do this. Some of you are starting out in your profession and you've just got to take the jobs that come. I have the luxury of being able to say to my clients, I'm not available on a Friday afternoon. What I say is this: I'm already fully booked. Would there be another time that we could schedule that briefing meeting? Obviously, if a client came to me and said, I'm going to pay you $100,000 to speak on a Friday afternoon, I'm going to take the money and I'll spend it on a Monday morning and take the time off. It's not rigid, but you get the idea. Right. The third thing you need to do to be anti-fragile is diversify your revenue streams. All your eggs in one basket. It's an idiom, a cliche, and a well-known phrase for a reason. Some of you think that speaking is a speaking business. Speaking is one of the things that speakers do. In fact, if you think of yourself as a speaker, you still haven't upgraded to where you should be. If this really is more than a hobby for you, speakers speak as a hobby. And I'm not downing Toastmasters. Toastmasters is brilliant, but Toastmasters knows what it's trying to do. It's trying to help people who need to do the odd 5 to 7 minute speech here or there to do a really brilliant job at doing it. And Toastmasters is really brilliant at getting people to that level. But it's a hobby. Toastmasters is not training you to speak professionally, even though it trains you with the skills you need. But the Professional Speakers Association is saying, how do you turn this into a business? And if it's a business, then we're taking it seriously and we're applying business principles. And businesses need to diversify their revenue streams. Companies that only did one thing and then that thing stopped, those companies died during COVID. Companies that were able to extend themselves did things. So Airbnb is a great example here, right? You'd think Airbnb is going to collapse. Airbnb have had their best 2 years ever. Why? Because they'd had a thought in the back of their minds that they wanted to add something called Airbnb experiences, which was instead of selling you a place to stay, they'd sell you something to do. And when COVID hit, they said, okay, we've been thinking about experiences for too long, switch it on. And it wasn't quite ready and it didn't quite work perfectly, but now it's one of their biggest revenue streams. Look it up if you haven't seen it, by the way. It's remarkable. You can sell people experiences. I'm going to put on a wine tasting experience for people. And basically you just saying, I will do this as an experience and people can buy it through the Airbnb system. Maybe you could sell a workshop. And you can get people to come and do it. There's a whole new platform for you to use. And it doesn't require an event organizer, it just requires you to let people know where they can book it. Diversify. Write a book and sell it. Might not pay off all of your debts, but it's better than not having a book and not selling a book. Turn a presentation into a workshop, turn a workshop into a presentation. You know the rest of the story, diversify. The fourth thing that we need to do, the fourth thing that anti-fragile organizations do is they realize they're part of a network, they're part of a community. And I got through COVID and you will get through the tough times in your career if you've got friends in this industry. I'm not inviting you to be my friend, okay? I've got enough friends. Some of you, let's become friends. But this is not a request for everybody to be my friend. I've got lots of friends. I have to do better at getting new friends. I want younger friends. I want newer friends. I want friends who are new in the industry. But I've been part of a mastermind group for, you probably won't believe this, 19 years. Same group of people. We support each other. We're more than colleagues. We're even more than friends. We live this world together. It's a weird industry. Don't try and do it alone. And then the final thing, the fifth thing I want to leave with you in my 20 minutes, which is nearly up, is to experiment more. The ladder to success doesn't start with success. We know this, you know this, you know this. But what you need to do is build experimentation into your DNA. How am I doing what I'm doing here? Well, when COVID hit, I realized we had to go online. So I took the car out of my garage, I put a carpet inside, I put a green screen behind me on the wall. I went out and I paid a professional to come and help me, tell me what lighting I needed, got my camera, I've got a nice big studio. Essentially, I've got a studio now that's as good as most new studios are. Didn't cost me as much as you imagine, but it allows me to be anti-fragile and allowed me to have 2 of my best years ever. Because you see, anti-fragility means that you see disorder as something positive that can allow you to grow and develop. Ayrton Senna, one of the greatest Formula One Grand Prix racing drivers of all time, used to say, you can't overtake 15 cars when it's sunny, but you can when it's raining. And as much as we are friends, as much as we are colleagues, as much as I wish you all the best of success in the world, we're also competitors. And it's not easy to prove how much better you are than somebody else when everything's fine, when everything's going well. But when the poo hits the fan, it separates out the people who know what they're doing and the people who take it seriously. And you know what? I'm not trying to boast in saying that. I think it's just the people who have a longer term focus, who look after themselves, who diversify their income streams, who rely on their networks and are prepared to experiment. So I've been doing these 5 things for 22 years and I hope to do them for 22 years and even longer. And I hope that we all do it together. But if you're just starting, or if you didn't know that you should do these things, you should have started 22 years ago, but the second best time is today. Thank you, and I hope that that was useful and helpful. Please be in touch. We'd love to chat about this more if you want to. Thank you very much.